Very little in wrestling compels me today. I hate to start the video that way, especially if you're a first-time watcher, but it's the truth. It's difficult for wrestling TV to really hook me in. I'd say the main reason for that is that hardly anybody tells stories in a unique and compelling way. A lot of these narratives feel like they've been sitting open in the pantry just getting stale. And there's very few wrestlers who know how to perfectly buck that trend. One of those wrestlers is one half of the match we're going to talk about today though. 10, aka Preston Vance, is someone who truly knows how to capture your... Alright, I'm not going to continue this. Jon Moxley is a beast. We know this. We've known it for a long time. It might as well be written into law at this point. He's AEW's true ace if we're talking their entire 5-year history. And it's why so many AEW fans hold him in such a high regard. And even before people met him through there, Dean Ambrose had his diehards. I know I was one of them. But Moxley isn't loved just because he has fantastic matches or cuts great promos. I mean, it's a part of it. But the main reason for why he's so loved is for his uniqueness. And I don't think that's put on display any better than in the match we're going to talk about today. Because 3 years ago, on October 27, 2021, Jon Moxley faced 10 on an episode of Dynamite. And it's there where I think the true essence of who Jon Moxley is and who he always should be was captured. This is Moxley versus 10, Essence of the Deathrider. Before we get into the match though, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel because you all know we're always talking graps. 10 makes his entrance first to start the proceedings, with footage of him picking up a few wins on Dark accompanying him. And while I know that we legit just started talking about the match, I think it's important we take some time to highlight 10 and talk a little bit about him before, he dies. Being a part of the Dark Order was kind of just what it was after we tragically lost Brody Lee. The group felt directionless. They served no real purpose anymore and existed mainly on YouTube as an aforementioned dark feature. They'd get their pops whenever they made an entrance on any given show. Of course they did. They were still a cherished act amongst AEW faithful, but it was clear to everybody that they were never going to be featured players, which isn't their fault at all, to be honest, but it was the reality. Which is why guys like Alan Angels, Stu Grayson, and Anna Jay all separated from it. They were all trying to lay their own path, and eventually 10 would try to do the same. Of course, he would change his name back to Preston Vance, he would lose his 10 mask in a really good angle with Brody Lee Jr., and especially most of all, would join La Facción Ingobernable alongside Rush. It should be noted too, before all that, 10 never really stood out as a guy to look out for. Sure, he had a great look, still does, especially after losing the mask, but there was never really anything to sink your teeth into. It really came down to his in-ring just not being that great. He didn't really have much of a variety of offense to showcase. And unfortunately, none of that really changed alongside Rush, and they wouldn't really do anything together as a unit. Those two would eventually split up, funnily enough, officially a couple months ago, and 10 would be back on his own, which apparently means he's working in ROH Pure Rules matches, which is morbidly intriguing. But really, there's a lot of interesting stories to tell here with Preston. He's been through a lot, and there's so many different ways his story in AEW could have gone. But I'd say of everything he's done, this match remains as one of his most memorable performances, because here he does exactly what he needs to do to make our next entrant, Jon Moxley, look killer. Now, if we're judging by the blue-eyed battler's look, shout out JR, you can easily tell that we're in for something mean. This grizzly badass looks locked in and ready to prove a point. Not just because that's what he does, but also because this match has a special aspect to it. This was a first round matchup in the AEW World Title Eliminator Tournament in which the winner would get a world title shot. So of course, as the former world champion, Mox was on a mission. We see this right away, where in the first 10 seconds of the match, he hits a release German suplex followed up with stomps in the corner, which then cuts right into him throwing Ten's face into the steel steps and ripping at his mask. This match has barely started and Mox is already being an animal, and of course, then Ten starts pouring blood. He's leaking all over the ring. It's a great cut, and of course, like a shark when it smells blood, Moxley pounces. However, like always said in wrestling, when you taste your own blood, you start to change, and Ten fights back with some pretty good strikes. All good things must come to an end though. Of course, this good thing only lasted just about 3 seconds, but it still comes to an end when Jon Moxley burst out of the corner with a King Kong lariat to shut that down. A few forearms ensue and then swiftly into a paradigm shift which shuts this whole thing down for good. So folks, to recap, we just reviewed a match that went 2 minutes and 4 seconds. So not a lot to talk about there, but I wanted to do this match because this version of Mox may be him at his best. Never more believable, scarier, animalistic, and it all comes together to form what is a perfect squash match, one of my favorites ever. I say all this to say, I want to see this Jon Moxley for this AEW World title reign he's on. Him and the Deathriders have been my favorite parts of AEW TV as of late, for sure. They don't feel phony in the slightest, their motivations make sense, and their segments feel unique to them. Then at the center, you have a jacked, a yoked Jon Moxley who's clearly feeling inspired again. Something we hadn't seen for a very long time after AEW decided Mox would be a challenger of the week type wrestler for some dumbass reason. That's not a version of Mox he should ever be. He needs to be the Deathrider Mox because that Mox has legs, and right now he seems ready to use them, and they can carry Dynamite for a long time. That is, as long as they're being supported by the booking, which is always a little scary. I said earlier though, to get back to it, I want to see the Mox versus 10 going forward in 2024, and while he's only had matches with Darby and Danielson so far, I am seeing little glimpses of it already. In both of those, it felt like he was working the match as if it was a transaction. No room to fuck around. He just needed to get shit done, which is exactly how he worked this match with 10. He got shit done and then left the guy laying bloodied in the ring. That's something that would look so fraudulent if it was anyone other than Mox. But it's the kind of niche he can fill so well. And it's what makes him so special as a wrestler. And it's why I chose this match, short as it is, to talk about today. It's funny because it's so short in fact that if you look on Cage Match, you won't find it under Mox's match guide. And if someone unaware were to find it, they wouldn't think anything of a Jon Moxley versus 10 match that went just over 2 minutes. But that's exactly what makes the Deathrider so special. He doesn't need 10, 15, 20 minutes to show who he is. All he needs is 124 seconds where he bloodies a guy and walks out the ring because that's what Jon Moxley does. He gets shit done, he leaves guys laying, and calls it a day. And that's why he's the ace. Squashes are an essential part of pro wrestling. And I think this one is one of, if not, the best of all time. And with that, that's going to do it for the video, everybody. I know this is a short one, but this is a match I really wanted to highlight in relation to Mox's current form. So I just kind of had to cover it right this moment. But I hope you had fun nonetheless. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, despite the runtime, make sure to leave a like down below. And also, comment your thoughts on the match, your memory of it, and whatever matches you'd like to see me cover in the future. There is a list that's forming with all the suggestions that you guys have been giving me, so make sure to drop some more below. And lastly, before we wrap this up, make sure to subscribe to the channel because no matter what, we're always talking grabs. Thank you all so much for watching. It's been Novi. Much love to each and every one of you. Peace.